and welcome to month 4 of Love Letter. This is the Love Letter block of the month, and we are going to be making 2 different types of blocks this month. Here's the quilt. It's folded in half, so this is the bottom half. And we are going to be making this block right here and this block right here. So we're going to make 2 on stream, and you're going to be making 3 of each to make this row on Love Letter. Again, this is Sherry Shish. I don't think I said that. I designed this quilt pattern for the fabric line Romance Garden by Island Batik. You can buy the pattern, links below, quilt pattern or quilt kit as supplies last, also in the link below. On the pattern that we're doing for month 4, you are going to be looking at pages 9 and 10, and you're also going to need fabrics H, J, and C. I guess it could be C, J, C, H, J, whatever, and background. So you're going to be cutting multiple different sizes of each one of these fabrics. So first things first, I'm going to actually go down with making the units as the pattern, so we're going to walk through that. The first thing we're going to do is make a square and a square with our fabric C. So you're going to take a fabric C, you're going to take 4 of your background squares, and we are going to be sewing a stitch and flip corner. Now, I will say a couple things. A stitch and flip corner for this quilt block for this month in general, we sew a lot of them. So this is a skill set that you need to learn how to do and or figure out how to compensate for yourself, okay? A couple things that we do for a stitch and flip corners, you can either mark your square on the diagonal and sew on the diagonal, or sew just a hair off just to be able to have enough fabric to fold over to fix your square. So we can do that. So you mark this line, and I will do that with a heat erasable pen. Okay, I'm going to do that, and we're going to mark corner to corner like so. Or you can use a clearly perfect angles. Okay, so clearly perfect angles looks like this. I think you can still get them in my shop as well, but this is super handy. It is what is on the bed of my machine that you kind of see. The tape lines are because mine is old and I had tape stuff together, and I also have a seam allowance line for 5/8 of an inch for when I bag make on my domestic machine. So ignore the painter's tape on there and all that stuff, but this is really what it is. This helps you not have to draw all of the lines that you're going to be doing for half square triangles and for stitch and flip corners. But I will show you how to use both. Okay? So we're going to go to the machine. I'm going to show you how to do it with the line that we just drew first. Okay? So we're going to align it to any of the squares. Okay? The one thing that we do want to make sure is that our line that we drew, the start and the end, touch a side of the square. Because if you did it the other way, right, you're going to sew on this line, what are you going to do? You're going to end up in the middle of your block, and you're like, now what? So edge to edge is what your line needs to be touching. And you're going to sew directly on this line, okay? The other thing that you need to look at is you can sew directly on this line or just to the right of this line, because when you open up your triangle or your square to make it a triangle, you want to make sure that this square is not lost. It's not too big, it's not too small, okay? I'm going to rotate 180, and now I'm going to show you what I'm do with our clearly perfect angles. We're going to do the same thing. And I'm going to align my block with some of the drawn lines. My corner is in the center. My corner is where that needle is going to go. And now I'm just going to sew in a straight line. And that is how you use your clearly perfect angles to draw or to sew down the middle without drawing all of your lines. Okay? So you're probably like, oh, what about the other 2? Well, right now, if I sewed the other 2, I'm not going to be able to open these 2 squares, so we're going to go ahead and trim off the excess fabric for these two. And I'm going to press these open. Okay? One thing I forgot, and it's because I make square to square a lot, is when you press them open, and you should have probably done this before you trimmed, by the way, make sure that you're covering the whole square, okay? So you should have pressed it open, made sure that it was there, and then cut it. But because I do these a ton, I did that without checking. But if you're new, I would check. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and do the other two corners. Same thing here, align it. So rotate it 180 to sew the other side. Like so. Okay. I'm going to do one of these correctly now, right? So we're going to press this open. We're going to say, okay, does that look right? If it does, then we're going to trim it off. There we go. At least I said the instructions correctly this time, right? All right. So now we're going to press these open. And the instructions tell you to make a lot of these. So we're going to make just this one on stream. And as if it's like movie magic, we have made several more. Ta-da! We have square and squares. Okay, so that is our first unit that we're making. The second unit that we're going to be making is a half square triangle, because we're going to be making an hourglass block, but the beginning of an hourglass block is 2 half square triangles. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take one of these and the background piece to go and make my half square triangle. I took 2 of them. I don't want 2 of them. Here we go. Okay. So we are going to go right sides together, and I'm going to sew on either side of the middle line. So in this case, this is about the size that is just big enough on my machines for clearly perfect angles. If I was trying to make a bigger half square triangle, I would absolutely recommend drawing a line. You want to make sure when you're sewing that where you start sewing and to where you end sewing, you can see the whole piece at the bed, on the bed of your machine. If the block is too big, I recommend still drawing your line. I could probably do it, but I'm going to draw my line anyways. Okay. So instead of a stitch and flip corner, when you're doing half square triangles, you're going to sew 1/4 inch off of either of the lines in the center. So what this means is I'm going to align my 1/4 inch foot to the drawn line, like so. And sew the whole way down. And I'm going to do that on the other side as well. Okay. And now you have essentially a half square triangle, right, when I press this open. Now, if I was making normal half square triangles, I would say I like trimming before I press. But with hourglass blocks, you don't trim until you've made your hourglass block. So I'm going to go ahead and press these into half square triangles. And the instructions also tell you that you're going to need to make a half square triangle with fabric H and fabric J to make a different half square triangle. Okay, which I happen to also have. This is the same process, right? So I have a half square triangle that looks like this. Okay, so we're going to take that down here and say, yep, I have 2 half square triangles now, neither of which are trimmed. I'm going to go ahead and lay them right sides together, nesting the seam. So I press towards the pink fabric on both of these half square triangles, and therefore my seams will nest. The other thing to note is that you don't want your pinks on top of each other. So if you think about this, and I'm going to say, yep, I'm going to sew this down, and I'm going to make a half hourglass block. This is the hourglass block that we're looking at. A background that's with fabric fabric H, sorry. These two together, and then the pinks on opposite sides. So in this case, same thing like you would if you didn't have clearly perfect angles. You want to draw a line perpendicular to the previous sewn line to make this hourglass block, right? To make it like so. If you draw it the other way, you're just going to sew on the line that you've already sewed on. Make sense? Otherwise, you can take it to the clear perfect angles and do the same thing. So I'm going to show you how to do that here. And it's actually a little bit different because of these black lines here and here. That is where you're aligning the piece with the diagonals. And then your point follows the left side. So it's a little bit different than if you were sewing along the marked lines. So that part of it is a little bit tricky, but other than that, same. All right, so now we have 2 hourglass blocks, which I am going to cut in half. One, I'm going to show you how I trim with a clearly slotted trimmers. Here it is. You need trimmer A. If you have made other Powered by Quilting patterns, you will know I love this trimmer. This is the way I make all of my hourglass blocks, all of my half square triangles. This is my preferred method. For this block, because it's an hourglass block, you have your dotted line of the ones that you just sewn, and then a solid line in the middle for the perpendicular line for the hourglass. You're going to make that trimmer, hold that trimmer down, trim up both sides and your dog ears, and you magically now have an hourglass. Ta-da! So, if you happen to not own a clearly slotted trimmers, and you're like, Sherry, I don't have that, what do I do? Well, it's going to be a little bit trickier, but you can also just press your block open, and I can show you how to trim it on a ruler that is slightly larger than your block. Now, to be fair, it might be easier for you to trim it with the size of your block. All right, so if I had this size ruler, I don't know if I do, yes I do. You actually have the center of where you're supposed to be and that diagonal line. So you can align your center on the diagonal line, know your points of where they're supposed to go, and trim that way. Now say like you don't have the same size, what you're going to want to do is take a larger ruler and know where this middle is. So the size block that you have, divide that by 2, and then that is where you're going to say, okay, that is my center. Align one of the diagonal lines to there, and then you'll want to make sure that the size of the block does hit the other diagonal as well, okay? So then we're going to trim this way. So you trim 2 sides, rotate it, and then trim your block down to size. In my opinion, this is so much more work. A lot of folks use a block ruler as well that holds that lip of your pressed seam. That also works. But then you also need to figure out how to do the correct sizing, if you need a ton of block rulers or not. And then for hourglass blocks, you're going to need to make sure you align it correctly. All right, so I made a couple of these also. So for the first block, we've essentially made all of our units. So I'm going to go ahead and lay out the block first, and then I'm going to show you how I web piece this block together. So we are going to take, this is a center, and then this is what the block looks like, right? With these stitch and flip corners, like so. This is our first block. And we're going to sew this web piece together, meaning we're going to sew column 2 to column 1, and then column 3 to column 2, and we're not going to snip in between each of the rows. We're going to snip at the end. Once we have that, we're going to press the rows, and then we're going to sew the long seams together, okay? So I'm going to do right sides together this way, and I'm going to sew down like that, okay? So now that we have columns 1 and 2, I'm going to actually finger press our seams. I'm going to finger press towards the hourglass block because it's just much brighter and more colorful. So it's like pressing towards the dark. All right. I'm going to finger press those. And then now we're going to add this third column to what we just sewn. And now we're going to sew that all the way down. Makes it a little goofy because I accidentally, normally I don't put them on top right sides together like I did, but I did it to move everything, so it's a little funky on my side. I'm gonna cut that. Do you see that I noticed that as I was sewing, so I'm going to readjust that real quick. I'm gonna unpick that because I don't love how that turned out, and the piece itself slid on me, so I am going to unpick that and resew. Because otherwise my block's going to look really weird, and that was totally fixable, and not because my piece was the wrong size, just I screwed up. So we're going to fix that. I didn't unpick everything because it wasn't necessary, so we're just going to start at the top again. So all the way down. Perfect. Add this. So now we have our piece, one piece together, and we're gonna go and press our seams. We're gonna press all of our seams towards the hourglass block, and that way our seams will go in, then go out, and then go in, so then when we sew our rows together, they'll nest. Even though I finger pressed the seams on the first set, or the first column, and between the first column and the second column, I still want to hit that with an iron to make sure that I set those seams correctly with heat. And then my overall block will then just sit that much flatter. Alright, so here's my block so far. It's all connected with these chain piecing things in the middle. I'm going to go ahead and put the top row and the second row together. We're going to pin these. I use fork pins, clover fork pins, to pin these together. I pin them on either side, and then my seams don't move, and I will do that for the other one. Clover fork pins are my pins of choice. I think they're pretty sharp, and then you can actually sew through them as long as you don't hit them at jackrabbit speed on your machine. So best practice is, as you are approaching this pin, slow down. Because if you hit it slow, your needle will just slide off of it. You hit it going super fast and it will collide, crash, break your pin, break your needle, and maybe throw your machine out of time. So just slow down. That's it. Alright, so we have column rows 1 and 2 sewn together. I'm going to rotate 180, open that up, and then put this right side together, pin it, and sew these together. I tend to like pinning in my lap, and unfortunately the camera doesn't I don't have a camera that's that close to me, so it's just awkward when I have to be up here pinning. And And then now we are going to go ahead and press our seams. To finish out this block. And there you have it. This is month 4, block A. All right, so like I said before, we have a block B as well that we are going to need to make. So this is block A. Block B, on the other hand, is a little bit different. So we are making, I think it's normally called a bow tie block, but because it's a big bow tie block, I didn't really want to do like 4 quadrants and 4 things. I took out as many seams as I could from this block. You're going to take a background piece. You're going to take a small fabric, J, H, whatever this is, H, the green one. And you're going to put it at the corner, and we're going to do a stitch and flip corner on this one. All right? So same thing like we did with the other stitch and flip corners. You could have drawn your line, sewn on the line, or this is small enough that I'm going to go ahead and do corner from the needle, corner to here, and sew down. I'm just going to use green and pink because honestly I get confused with the letter numbers right now as I'm talking, so we're going to do that. Okay, again, check that to make sure this covers everything to make that the square. If it does, trim off the excess. Iron it. And now we have a stitch and flip corner with the green. You're going to need 2 of these and 2 pink ones, okay? So I did 2 of those, 2 greens, and 2 pinks. Magic. All right, the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take a bigger pink and green than these, and we're gonna sew them just together to make a rectangle, okay? You're gonna need 4 of them. I'm gonna show you why in a second. But I've been pressing them to the pink, just because I think the pink is a darker color. Okay, so you need 4 of these. I've made a couple extras. And this is how we're actually gonna build our bow tie block. Okay, kind of see what we're going and we're doing here. These little squares that we did were the corners. Now we have the center section, right? I said I was taking out as many seams as possible, and that means I have a really, really big background square that's gonna fit right here. But you're like, wait, I need the rest of my bow ties, right? So we're gonna need to put a pink corner across and green corners across. So I'm gonna take 2 pink and 2 green, little small squares here, and we're gonna do stitch and flip corners on the edges, okay? And because they're so small, I don't actually have to finish, opposite sides, cut them, and then press. I can wait until the very, very end to do all of them, because I can add the sides, each of the sides, without interfering with any other one. And what I mean by that is, here's the pink one, I'm gonna add a green one. So the next one, I rotated 90 degrees, right? And now I'm going to add the green one here. Now I'm going to add the pink one. And now I'm going to add the green one. So pink is on opposite sides, green is on opposite sides. So, ta-da! All right. I did not leave enough space for me to trim this. I'm going to move this out of the way. So now, same thing here, stitch and flip corners. I got to make sure when I press these all open that my square is the same size If it is, then I'm going to go ahead and trim these up. All right, trim, trim, trim. Okay. And then I'm going to press these out. This is what I feel like folks call a snowball block, right? Because you've essentially made a snowball or an octagon or a stop sign. But this is the center of my bow tie block. Really, this was my nod to like X's and O's, right? Because this seems very X-y and this is an O. And so here you go. That is what the block is going to look like. And what do you know? This looks like a grid. So what do we do with grids? We web piece. So very similarly to how we sewed this block together, this one will be very similar. The only difference, right, is that the center of the grid, like the center row and the center column, is fatter or thicker than the sides. So typically what I like to do, I like sewing the smaller piece on the larger piece. So I will take column 3, so it's column 2, and then rotate everything. And so now what would be column 3 to column 2 again. Okay. So we're doing that like so. Ta-da. We're going to sew those together. And you want to make sure, this is a really nice like error checking, right? Pink should not be sewing onto pink. Green should not be sewing, green should not be sewing onto pink, and pink should not be sewing onto green. Like the same colors should be touching each other. Because you already sewed the pink and green together squares. That's where the only time that they really touch each other that is not the same color. So now that we have this sewn together, we're going to go ahead and take these, like so, rotate it very carefully, and sew down this direction. Okay? And this is why it makes it really easy to error check because, like, this is obviously a green to a green piece because this is a green square that I'm sewing on, right? So that part of it makes it much easier to not screw up. And then the same thing in the middle is, you know that you have to have the green on top and the pink on the bottom because your corners are that way. And now, same thing with your pink. So now that you have all your rows sewn together, we're going to go ahead and press our block. I'm going to press towards the squares, so away from any stitch and flip corners, towards the solid pieces of fabric here. So now that we have our block, we're going to sew the long seams together. We're going to put right sides together, pin, sew together, and then rotate and do the other side as well. This is probably one of my favorite blocks from this month to do, or this book to do. I think it's really fun. I don't know why. And normally when you do this, when you have the same size square, you gotta like open it, flip it out of the way. I technically didn't need to do that because you see how my edges would not have sewn on top of each other, but out of habit, I unpin, and now we'll be pinning the other side. It's a simple block, but it's a fun one, so I really like this block. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and press these long seams, and month 4, block B, is done. So now you can go and make the 3 block A's and the 3 block B's, and that is month 4, you guys. Nice and easy. I love this month. I think the blocks are super fun. And you end up with a wheel. So month 4, block B, month 4, block A, and I believe in the quilt top, let me look real quick. When you sew them together, they're going to be the same. Like, it's just going to be repeating. You don't do any fun rotations. Some of the other rows, if you notice, I rotate the block to get like a little sine wave going, but this row is identical. All right, so that is it for this month of Love Letter, month 4. Love Letter month 5 and 6 in assembly will start at noon Central. So now that Wish block of the month is over, this will normally start at noon Central. The start time for Love Letter has been kind of bananas just because we were doing Wish block of the month before that the last couple months. But we are done with Wish now, and now I need to look at the calendar because in August... Okay, so yeah, in August, I gotta make sure I'm looking at the right weekend. Month 5 will be August 24th. Okay, it will not be any earlier. I think it's August 24th. If it doesn't say that on the website, it might be wrong on the website. I'm actually out of town the 10th and the 17th, so it will be August 24th. I will be here at noon doing month 5 of Love Letter. Love Letter. Oh my goodness, I cannot talk. If you have any questions or if you have any comments or whatever that you need, drop a comment below and I'll respond as soon as I can. The other thing is, if you are just now finding my channel, like, subscribe, that'd be really great. Follow. And then if you want to make this quilt but want to make it with your own fabrics, links below to the PDF pattern. And then if you want to make this exact quilt, I have 2, maybe a couple quilt kits left. So if you want to make this exact quilt, it's really not too late to start. You can do that. I do also stream on Twitch every Saturday when I'm here. Same thing in August. Those 2 weekends I'm not here. Starting at 9 o'clock Central. I do go through like all of the other blocks. Like I have to go and make the other blocks for this quilt. During that time, I also sew bags. And then that is probably the best way to have a conversation with me if you have a question or comment or whatever. All right. Have a great weekend, everybody, and I'll see you next month. Bye-bye.